Hi all, I'm Sydney. I work with the Sierra Nevada Alliance, and we have Sarah here talking today about the common birds and rarities of in Tahoe, sorry. And she works with the Tahoe Institute for National Sciences. I'm going to go ahead and let her start speaking.
Sounds good. So hello everyone, my name is Sarah Hockensmith. I'm the Outreach Director for the Tahoe Institute for Natural Science. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you all about birds, which is my favorite natural history subject. Currently, I've been researching all summer, so I haven't really had very many interactions with the public. I've barely checked my emails, so it's really nice to be able to have a meeting and chat with people about something that we are all interested in, which is birds. So since there aren't too many people at this webinar today, I want you to feel comfortable asking questions that you might have. You can type it in the chat box, and if you do so, I won't be able to see it if I'm sharing my screen. So you can unmute yourself and ask a question if I seem to have a pause in my PowerPoint. So feel free to ask questions. And we're gonna get started. So I'm gonna share my screen, and if there's any issues, please let me know, because sometimes when I've done a Zoom meeting and like I'm muted and then everyone's too nice to say anything, say something, because we want the best experience for you. So I'm gonna share my screen now. Here we go. And start with this. Here we go. Can everyone, Joanna and Tim, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my shared screen? Perfect. Okay, because I can see your heads in the corner. All right. So I titled this presentation, Birds of Lake Tahoe, What Can You Find? And again, I'm Sarah Hockensmith. So before we dive into birds, I have to introduce my awesome nonprofit that I work for. I work for the Tahoe Institute for Natural Science, and basically all staff and our mission, we love the outdoors, and we love all the biology and natural history that surrounds Lake Tahoe and the Truckee region. And we believe that if we are able to research and understand our natural history and be able to share it with adults and children, then that will create this sense of stewardship, so other people will want to share more about natural history, and they'll want to steward our backyard. So that's our mission. And we do that through 3 pillars. So our first pillar is science. So I work with Dr. Will Richardson. He's a PhD biologist, and he studies all different things in the region, from black-chinned hummingbirds to flycatchers, Swainson's thrush, salamanders, and even hares. So I've been working under him all summer doing nest surveys. So we know a lot about our local flora and fauna. And then we take that information and we take the information that we research and we teach kids inside and outside of the classroom. So we have curricula developed to teach children K through high school about our local flora and fauna. We take them outside to learn about insects and birds and all of these different things. They actually come watch us conduct research. So this is Dr. Will with a bird in his hand, and we were doing some bird banding research, and the kids came to see that scientists have really fun, really important and intrinsic jobs. So kids can watch that and maybe be inspired to be scientists one day. We have summer camps so kids can go out in nature and learn outside of school. I've even developed a bird club at the local elementary school. So the kids go birding with me before school, which is, they wake up earlier than most people do. And yeah, we spend a lot of time with kids. We reach 6,000 to 8,000 kids a year with just 3 staff. So we're very understaffed. The last thing, which involves adults, is our outreach program. So if it wasn't a pandemic and everyone's quarantining inside, we provide basically weekly nature walks, so wildflower walks, lots of bird walks, geology, all throughout the year. So that's available once this pandemic slows down. We also facilitate citizen science surveys, so you can help us collect data. That's not too difficult to do. We're year-round, so you can come out in the winter and do Christmas bird counts or bald eagle counts. and so on. So jumping into birding, especially being a young birder, I get a lot of people are pretty skeptical, like, why do you like birds so much? What's so interesting about birds? And that made me think, like, why do people bird watch in the first place? And I think it's important, especially right now with this pandemic and, you know, staying inside and being stuck inside the house all the time. This is a great outlet to continue to appreciate what's surrounding you and give you kind of that positivity outside. It also teaches you patience, because you're not going to be able to see all the things that you want to see each time you go out. I feel like I have like a super sense where I'm able to detect things very quickly. If I see something flying in the corner of my peripheral with bird watching and how long I've been doing it, my senses have been heightened. As you go outside, which is nice to get people to exercise. It has encouraged me to travel the world, all through South America and Europe. And basically, it's a treasure hunt without hurting anything. So you're not destroying anything, you're just watching something from afar, and it's only going to teach you more. So that's why I think people that are interested in bird watching, there's so many benefits to doing so. In this picture I took in Florida at a nature preserve. And here's also another picture of me going to Costa Rica because I wanted to look for birds. So for those that are newer to birding, can you raise your hand if you're more of a newer birder? Cool. Okay, raise your hand if you're an intermediate birder. Okay, and then raise your hand if you're an advanced birder. I mean, there's always room for growth. So even if you are intermediate, advanced, beginner, there's always something you can learn. Even with when it is in terms of like any sort of animal, like robins or chickadees. So birding 101, if you're a new bird watcher, you need to start out with a field guide, because it's going to be really tough to identify anything unless you have someone helping you identify that bird. So there's tons of different field guides, but the one that I would recommend is Sibley's Birds of the West. I think his illustrations are very accurate, although he does like to go a little bit saturated, or very colorful in his illustrations, just to kind of show how strong certain colors are. But I like his guide a lot. Also, you might want to consider buying binoculars, and if you're a birder or a new birder, 8x32s is a great first bird watching binoculars, because you can still see a lot within your binoculars, but it's at a high enough power where you can see them, like different parts of the bird, a lot better. I always encourage people to bring a notebook and a pencil when they go out to bird watch, so you can write down the details that you see, because if you write something down, the more of the chance that you'll remember it. And then we also have my institute, Tahoe Institute for Natural Science, has created a Birds of the Lake Tahoe Basin checklist, which shows what species of birds will be in this area at what time of year, and then how rare those birds will be in that area at that time of year. So that kind of helps you weigh, like, oh, is this bird here? And then you go see something that looks very similar to it, and it's very common, and the other one's very rare. You're most likely going to see the one that's common. So that's very helpful. And then lastly, if you're into apps and anything on your phone, there's an app called eBird, which is each time you log in a bird, so if you've ever identified a bird outside somewhere, it will log where you found it and what it is, so other people can find it too. And then it's also contributing to citizen science and data. Normally when I give this presentation, there's an audience and they are able to participate with this, but you guys can say it out loud since you're muted and I can't hear you. Let's try to guess the topography of the bird first, okay? So what do you think number one is?
The beak.
The beak, nice, okay. Well,
can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So that little guide that you've had available on your website, on the TINS website, is that free? Or is that something you guys are selling?
Great question. So you can download it for free on our website, which is tinsweb.org, and I'll give you that website at the end. But also you can buy it if you wanted a hard copy. It's $2 just because it covers our printing. But you can definitely download it online for free. It's black and white, or you can, ask us and I'll send it to you in the mail for $2. But and next time, Victoria, if I see you at a meeting, you can have one for free. It's just let me know.
Thanks, Kat.
Yeah. So number one, what does everyone think number one is?
The beak.
Okay. So I like to use the word beak, but if you are a birder, typically you use the word bill. So birding 101. So we'll say, oh, that bill is triangular or conical. And there's different ways to describe bills, and bills can really help identify what family of birds that you're looking at. But we like to call it the bill, but beak is not a wrong answer. Oh, I'm sorry. I gave you this one's the obvious one. So head is the obvious one, but does anybody know what the top of the head is called? There's two different words.
Crown.
Nice. So it's crown or crest. So crown is typically when it's rounded and has it's more of a circular head, where crest is like our Steller's jays that have that really pokey mohawk. We like to use the word crest to describe that. And the reason why I'm going over bird topography, so when we're going through the birds later in this presentation, you can say wow, that has a really pretty crest. And so you get to use that terminology, which makes you an even better birder. And I also like to color in with kids, color in the different topography parts and then label them, because then you'll really remember them. So we have our back here, which is an obvious one, but does anybody know what number 4 is? All right, it's called the rump. And if you are familiar with the yellow-rumped warbler, they have a yellow spot right above their tail. So a rump's a good bird part to remember, because there's different distinctive rumps. 5 is obviously the tail. Does anybody know what number 6 is? This is the vent or the undertail. So on certain towies, they're bright orange. So vents can be very colorful. Number 7 is, does anybody know what this one is? The belly. So the breast, which is after the wing, I'm just going to jump ahead because it's kind of tough to do this virtually. But we have our wing, and then if you get into all the different topography of the bird, you're going to start to know all the different parts. So there's a ton of different things to learn. So once you've learned the basics, then you can go into the tertials and the primaries and the secondaries and the coverts and the lures and stuff like that. But we're going to go a little bit more into the history of bird watching. I'm going to skim through this, and then we'll start looking at some Tahoe birds. So obviously this is the American version of bird watching, and Native Americans watched birds well before we came to the US. But John James Audubon, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that name, Audubon. He was a guy that lived in France and decided to come to the US to have this business, to dive into business opportunities. And he was really bad at diving into business opportunities. But what he was really good at was drawing birds. So back then in the late 1700s and early 1800s, instead of people taking a picture and drawing a bird, they would actually shoot birds and then pin them and taxidermy them and then sketch them based on basically hunting them. So obviously it's way different than it is now. And we have a passenger pigeon, which is extinct, and we have our ivory-billed woodpecker, which is also extinct. But that was the way that things were. And John James Audubon, he made this illustration book called Birds of America, and it was 450 illustrations similar to these that he provided to the public. And people caught on. They're like, wow, this is a really interesting thing. I'm going to start bird watching. But after John James Audubon passed away, it's a mix of a story, but basically every Christmas, people would go out and shoot as many birds as they could in a day. And obviously that's not a good decision, because that's just really sad. But back then things were a little bit more Wild West, and people would go out and shoot as many birds as they could in a day. But in 1900, a group of naturalists or people that were inspired by John James Audubon decided to come up with the first Christmas bird count, which is now the longest citizen science study, which a bunch of people get together and they see what's there and post it online or document it and share it with the world. So they stopped killing birds and they started watching birds, which was a huge success for bird watchers and birds alike. And here's a picture of the first CBC, or Christmas bird count. Bunch of really awesome older women and one guy. So in the Great Depression, Roger Peterson wrote a book, a novel of the first field guide to birds in North America. It was a pocket-sized guide this time. It's this really large book of illustrations. And even in the Great Depression, it sold out in a week. So there was definitely a need and interest in bird watching, probably why some of you have signed up today. But it's one of the most popular hobbies in the world, and a lot of people enjoy it. So we're going to skip past this because I want to get to birds of Lake Tahoe. So my first question is, it's not a question because it's here. We have 317 species of birds that inhabit the Tahoe region. And that's actually a decent amount of birds given how cold our areas get and how it's just very filled with a lot of conifers, and there aren't too many places with riparian or meadow habitat. But we do have 317 plus species of birds that live here in the region. And out of those 317 species, we have 65 that will stay here year round. So obviously a lot of them are they're second homeowners, or they come here only for a season, or maybe just to breed, or sometimes they'll even come down here in the winter because it's warmer than where they came from, up towards the Arctic or Alaska. Again, most of them are migratory, and a lot of them here are summer nesters, which I'll talk about a few of the summer nesters that we have. But does anybody know what species of bird this is on this water fountain?
White-headed woodpecker.
White-headed woodpecker, and it's a male because it has this red nape, or the red spot on the back of its head. Awesome, nice job, Tim. So the first group of birds I'm going to dive into is birds of prey, because we see them year-round and they are majestic. So does anybody know what species of bird, or what species this is? Anybody in the chat box? All right, this is a red-tailed hawk. Okay, and this is a juvenile red-tailed hawk. Note it has a yellow eye. But red tails don't always have a red tail. So you might have looked over here at the tail and you're like, oh, that's not a red-tailed hawk because it doesn't have a red tail. Well, red-tailed hawks don't get a red tail until they're at least a year old. So obviously here's our adult red tail, here's darker eyes and this red tail. So that's a great distinctive feature of that species of bird. But to even show the complexity of bird watching, here are two different types of morphs of red-tailed hawk. So right here we have like a rufous morph where it's a lot more like darkish red, and then we have this like lighter morph. But here's the best way to tell a red-tailed hawk. You see how on the head it goes dark, then it goes light, dark, light, okay? Dark, light, dark, light. So if you can see that distinctive difference when it goes head is dark, upper breast is light, mid breast to belly is darker, and then the belly is light, then that means it's a red-tailed hawk. So there you go. That's your little trick. And obviously if you see a red tail, you know what it is, but sometimes that's not always an easy clue to see. So here's another species of hawk we get in the winter time. This is called our rough-legged hawk. See how his legs are really fuzzy and they have little feathers that go all the way down to its toes. But this is a really beautiful hawk that you can see flying around in the valley, especially Carson Valley or Sierra Valley. And a really great distinctive feature are these dark wrist patches that are towards the tips of the feathers on this bird. So really beautiful bird that we get here. So it's more of a rarer one in comparison to our red tail, which we can see every day. Does anybody know what hawk this is?
Red-shouldered.
Nice, awesome, very good. This is a red-shouldered hawk. Note you don't see dark light. It's more just like kind of a streaky pattern. These are a little bit smaller too than red-tailed hawks, and they have a striped black and white tail. So I don't see these too often in Tahoe, but if you're from the Valley or Sacramento, these are one of the most common hawks that you'll see. But they do live here in the basin. Does anybody know what type of hawk this is? This is more of a rarer one.
Ferruginous?
Very good. Was that Joanna that said that?
No, Ann Chadwick.
Oh, nice, Ann.
Hi.
Yes. So this is a ferruginous hawk, very great, which in the wintertime, you can see them sitting. They like to sit on the ground in the snow, especially in the Carson Sierra Valley. They just sit there. They kind of blend in really well because they're so white. But their legs have this like orange V when they fly, so that's an easy way to detect them. And ferruginous, I think it means like orange or something like that in a different language, and that's where they get their name ferruginous. But a great way to also tell a ferruginous hawk, if you can see them close up, is if you've ever seen Batman and you've seen the Joker, how he has that big smile. I like to think about this long gape that this ferruginous hawk has. It's longer than any other bird that I see. So that's a good telltale sign that it is a ferruginous hawk. But these are, so the rough-leg hawk that I showed you with those dark patches on its wings and the ferruginous are two birds that you can see a lot more in the winter time because they come from up north. And here's a dark morphed ferruginous hawk. So it's great to know that there's different juvenile versus adults look different. And also there's different morphs of birds, especially when it comes to raptors. Does anybody know what bird this is? Notice the white rump. See that vocabulary? This is a telltale sign. It's called a northern
harrier.
Nice, very good. So we have some birders here. Awesome. Yeah, this is a northern harrier. A lot of the times when I go birding, a lot of people call it the marsh hawk. But these are really beautiful. They like to glide really close to the ground, and just behavior. If you see a bird acting a certain way, a lot of the times you can tell what it is based on its behavior, or the way that it flies or pecks or whatever. So this northern harrier glide along a meadow's edge or along a river's edge, and they're looking for mice and all these different rodents. And the males are like a grayish color, and they have that white rump, where the females are more of a brownish color. So males and females can also look a little bit different. But I like this northern harrier because it looks like it has like an owl head. Really cool. Here is, it's actually not a good picture, but oops, I'm just gonna go straight to this guy. Move this over. I was gonna talk about our peregrine falcons. I don't really like that picture. I was gonna talk about peregrine falcons. So they normally have those teardrops. It looks like they're like bleeding dark tears on a peregrine falcon, but we have them here in the basin, and that's been one of my research projects the past 5 years, is to go up to Picnic Rock and look in this hole that's like a quarter mile to half mile away and watch for peregrine falcons breeding here in the area. So I know this is a very poor picture, but I just wanted to point out, this is the mom right here, and this is the little tiny peregrine falcon chick. So I took this from well over a quarter mile away through a scope with my iPhone. So obviously it's not a great picture, but this year, when we researched them, a lot of the governmental entity partners couldn't make it to the surveys because of COVID and all the regulations. So we took on a big role researching them solely with TRPA as well. And we had the second year ever at this location where these peregrines fledged and had successful chicks that flew out of the nest and did well. Whereas before, this is also a really popular rock climbing route. So in the years past, we've had a lot of failures because they've been disturbed. So we've been going out there and studying them and then putting up signs to tell climbers, hey, there's peregrines nesting here in this scrape on these walls. Use these routes and don't hike to the top. And because the community in Tahoe decided to really pay attention to those rules, I guess a lot of the community, because I did see a lot of people that were still not following the rules, but there was just a lot less impact, and we had success this year. So hooray for peregrines.
That was great news.
Yeah, I was so excited, especially doing it for as long as I have and just seeing failure after failure. And then each year we've just taken another step to, and a step towards success with a little bit more monitoring, a little bit more regulation. And yeah, we have success here, so it's exciting.
Yeah, does the parents come back to the same nesting site, or the fledgling come back to the nesting site?
So a lot of the times the same parents will come back, but I also have observed another peregrine liking that spot too and fighting over it. You kind of get to know the pair pretty well if you sit there for 4 or 5 hours at a time, multiple days. This is just an excellent area for nesting. So if these parents didn't come back, it probably would be occupied anyways by a falcon. So it's pretty cool. This will be our last group of raptors. This is genus Accipiter, or sorry, a family Accipiter. And so these birds, I took pictures that looked different just to help you. But this is a sharp-shinned hawk, which is called a sharpie. And this is a Cooper's hawk. And they look almost identical, especially if you're just looking at them from an angle when they're sitting on a tree branch. But something to remember, especially with buteos or hawks in general, or raptors, is that the female is typically larger than the male. So with this Cooper's hawk, a Cooper's hawk male would be the same size as a sharp-shin female. Okay, so sharp-shin, the one on, can you see my mouse? Put a thumbs up if you can see my mouse. Okay. This sharp-shin, she has like more of a rounded head and more of a squared off tail. And there's a couple other distinctive characteristics to tell the differences. But sharp-shin hawks are a lot smaller if you're comparing like a female sharp-shin with a male female versus a female Cooper's. But our Cooper's hawk typically is a lot larger. They have more of a squared head, so they have a little bit of a crest, which kind of raises to make them look more fierce or intense. And they also have a rounded off tail. So the rounded off tail and the squared off tail is like one of my go-tos when it comes to these birds, and then also the shape of the head. But I like to look at the tail when I'm trying to figure out whether it's a sharp-shin hawk or a Cooper's hawk. And another type of accipiter that we have, does anybody know what this one is? It's our coolest one, I think. Our northern goshawk. So I don't know if you've ever heard of goshawk surveys. There's a lot of people or biologists that study this bird. But they, just like the other two, so the sharp-shin, the sharp-shin, the Coopers, and the northern goshawk. They all have very long tails in comparison to other raptors. And what they like to do to hunt is they'll fly through trees, like tree branch, under and over tree branches, and through through trunks that are close to each other. And they'll catch birds in flight. So they're very, very majestic hunters, and they can fly through our conifers. And also you can see these birds, not the goshawk, but other accipiters in like cities. They can be flying around through buildings, in between buildings and stuff as well. And note that accipiters have like these reddish eyes, which I find are really, really interesting with birds. And here's a Cooper's hawk eating a chipmunk. So I said that a lot of the times these birds eat other birds. So here's a northern goshawk eating a pigeon, but here's a Cooper's hawk eating a chipmunk. So sometimes they eat mammals off the ground too. Okay, so I have 3 different eagles here, different individuals. And does anybody know what this eagle is with the dark head?
Golden eagle?
Good guess. I don't know who guessed that, but good guess. Anybody have a different guess?
A juvenile bald eagle?
Nice. Very good. Cool. So I wanted to trick you a little bit. So thanks. Whoever said the golden eagle, thank you. But this is a first-year bald eagle. This is, I think, second year bald eagle. And here's a bald eagle that's 5+ years. So even just the basic bird that you see, oh, you know it's a bald eagle because it has a white head and a white tail. Well, they have different morphs or different plumages as they reach 5 years old plus. So even just knowing the different ages of these birds is important. And notice also, not just with this first year juvenile bald eagle, it has a dark eye, a dark bill, and a fully dark body, where is the 5th year bald eagle has a light eye, a fully yellow bill, and a white head and tail. So, and here's our golden eagle. So if you see how on the back of this juvenile bald eagle, it's kind of dark on the nape, which is the back of the head, whereas the golden eagle, see how it's like a lighter color. So the back of the nape is a good distinction between the two. And then also another distinction is golden eagles, they have their feathers come all the way down to their feet, where bald eagles have more of a bald spot in between. So there's all these different little characteristics and distinctions that you can identify to help you look at bald eagles versus golden eagles. But I also think that a bald eagle's bill just looks way too big for its head in comparison to a golden eagle. It just looks better. Personally, I haven't read that in a book, but just personally, I'm like, this looks ridiculous. Whereas this looks a little bit more normal. And golden eagles are bigger in size. But let's say there's a male golden eagle versus a female bald eagle. That's a juvenile. Those sizes can look very similar. All right. And speaking of eagles, this is my transition to waterfowl, because a lot of our eagles and hawks that come down, or that we see in the wintertime, they come to the Tahoe region in the wintertime to feed on coots. So if you see bald eagles in the summer, sometimes they'll nest in Lake Tahoe, but you'll see huge increase in population in bald eagles in the winter, because they're coming to feed on our waterfowl, which is also an increase in the summer as well. So obviously this wasn't taken at Lake Tahoe, it's probably somewhere in the valley, but here's a huge flock of northern pintails. I just love this picture. Cool. So we are going to talk about ducks. Ducks are interesting, and especially if you're new to birding, best start with ducks, because ducks don't move very much, especially dabbling ducks. So behaviors also can help you identify the differences between different types of birds. So we have our diving ducks. Clearly they dive underwater. And then we have our dabbling ducks. So there's two different groups of ducks. And the dabbling ducks stick their bums in the air and they feed on aquatic invertebrates and plants and stuff like that. So they don't all the time fully submerge. They typically stick their bums up in the air and dabble. So here's an example also of a diving duck versus a dabbling duck out of water. A lot of the times you can see like a mallard out of water, or this is a northern shoveler female. But diving ducks, their legs are typically more towards their tail, where dabbling ducks, they have their legs more in the center of their body. And that's why you don't see diving ducks really outside of water too often, because they spend majority of their time inside the water, where dabbling ducks will come to land and like hang out and stuff like that. So that's a good distinction of the two as well. So here's our first dabbling duck. This is actually, you tell me, what is it?
Wood duck.
Wood duck.
A wood duck. Very
That's my
good.
favorite.
Oh, it's Joanna's favorite. Very cool. Well, wood ducks are one of my favorite too, especially the males, because they look like they're like from a different universe. I don't know. They're so beautiful. But wood ducks also, something interesting to note is that they like to nest in cavities, so old woodpecker holes or old holes in trees that have been kind of dug out. And when they have their chicks, sometimes there's a bunch of different females chicks in one nest, because sometimes they'll lay their eggs in a different nest and stuff like that. Well, their babies, when it's time to move along, they'll jump out of the cavity and like fall to the ground, sometimes up to like 40 feet. And then they just walk to the water. So I feel like that's a very interesting way to start life. Maybe will teach us a lesson to be tougher. Here's also our most common dabbling duck, which is our mallard. So here's our male dabbling, or our male mallard and our female mallard. Something to remember that a lot of female ducks look very similar. So a good thing to remember with the female mallard is see this like black line that goes over her eye. That's a good distinction of a female mallard. So when you're seeing like a brown duck in the water, if you see that dark line over the eye, most likely it's a female mallard. So that's a good thing to remember. And this guy, you will remember. Here are some widgeons. So somebody's having like a honking party or something. Anyways, these are two different widgeons. We have our American widgeon up here, and we have our Eurasian widgeon, which we also get in Tahoe. So American widgeons are pretty common. You can see them a decent amount here. Note the white forehead and this like black kind of like eye ring, and then green down the back of the head to the nape. And then here is our Eurasian widgeon, which we found at one of our birding tours, I think last year. So we do get both, although the Eurasian widgeon is not as common. Here is a northern pintail, which is also a type of dabbling duck. Notice that the tail is much longer than most ducks that you see. And even the female, even though she has this faint little bit of black in her eye, it's not as distinctive as the mallard, but also she has this kind of smaller pintail. So that's a good way to identify her. You can find them, especially at the Upper Truckee Marsh in South Lake Tahoe. I've seen them a bunch there. We also get all three different species of teal. We have blue-winged teal, green-winged teal, and one of my favorites is the cinnamon teal. So they're like red eyes and mostly like reddish brown body. They're really, really cool to see in person. And I've also seen all three of those at the Upper Truckee Marsh in South Lake Tahoe. Okay, before we get to diving ducks, does anybody have any questions or something they'd like to share?
I'd like to make a quick note that I was informed by my supervisor that someone else will need the Alliance account at 4 o'clock. So.
Wait, say that again?
So the Alliance account that we use for Zoom is shared between the whole office, and I was informed that it will be needed at 4 o'clock.
Perfect. I'll go faster. Sounds good. So we have diving ducks. This is our most common diving duck, which is our common merganser. Note the female here has a mohawk or a crest if we want to be scientific. And the males look kind of similar to a dabbling mallard, but a lot different at the same time. So these also nest in cavities alongside with our hooded merganser, which is a really cool, funky bird. This is a male. They also nest in cavities. So similar to the wood duck. I'm actually going to pass through a couple of these ducks because we only have 20 minutes. I'm going to get to like some other really cool birds. But here's our bufflehead. They also nest in cavities similar to the wood duck. And they actually are starting to breed in Tahoe, which is cool. And they're very, very small, and they can fit into an old flicker or northern flicker cavity. Here's a ruddy duck, which is also a diving duck, and they have this blue bill, and they also kind of have like a pintail tail, but they also look a lot different. Very, very cool. Where the females kind of have like this dark, I don't want to explain it, but you can definitely tell it's a ruddy duck if it's a female as well. Oh, I do have a picture. Cool. I haven't done this presentation in a while, but if her tail's out of the water, you can really see this kind of like longer feathered tail. But just kind of this cool mask. Interestingly enough, because Tahoe is such a large lake and not necessarily resembles an ocean, but is pretty big, we get scoters that happen to be in our lake sometimes. So we have our surf scoter here that we've seen in Tahoe. We have a black scoter and a white winged scoter. So all three species of scoters have been seen here in Tahoe. And I've seen this surf scoter a couple times, so pretty cool. And I guess for those that are more so newer, scoters typically live most of their life in the ocean. So when they happen to come to Tahoe, it's a cool and a big deal because like, why are they here? They live in the ocean. So it's nice to see a bird that's primarily an ocean dweller come up to our big lake. Here's a coot, which is not considered a duck. So you'll see these black birds with the white bill and red eyes. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's a weird duck. Well, it's not considered a duck. It's in the Railiae family. Notice its feet. You see how they're not all webbed together, kind of like monster feet. When they dive down, I wish you can see. Can you see my my picture in the corner at all? Oh, you can't. Okay. When they dive down, they close their feet together and they dive, and when they go back up, they'll open it so the water goes through, so they can like be very efficient when they're swimming. So very, very cool bird. We'll get past this gull. It's a Sabine's gull. It's also a pelagic bird that comes from the ocean occasionally. We get Jaegers here. Jaeger means hunter in German. So we've had all 3 species of Jaeger, parasitic, long-tail. And they're really interesting because the best way to spot a Jaeger, which isn't very common here, is when you see a bunch of gulls, like California gull or ring-billed gull, all in like this uproar. And typically because it's a Jaeger chasing them. And so the Jaeger chases the gull after the gull eats, and the gull throws up what it eats, and then the Jaeger eats it. So weird fact, but birds are weird, and so are humans and all things in nature. So the more that you learn about each species of bird, you'll be like, what? Birds are weird. So we're going to dive into smaller birds. So I'm going to need your help. Does anybody know what this bird is, or what type of bird it is?
White-breasted nuthatch.
Nice. Awesome. So this is our white-breasted nuthatch. It's one of our 3 species of nuthatches that we have here in the region. So we have all 3. These live more in like the fur dense areas. And out of the 3, I see the white-breasted nuthatch the least. The one I see the most of is our red-breasted nuthatch. And I'm going to play its call for you. Thumbs up if you can hear that. Cool. So the red-breasted nuthatch goes ring, 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 and it sounds like a car alarm kind of in the forest. And so all 3 of these birds are permanently here in Tahoe. They don't migrate. They stay here year-round. They're true Tahoe locals. And the reason behind that is they can find food in the wintertime. So a lot of the primary reason behind the drive of migration is food availability. And a lot of birds that come to Tahoe in the summertime are looking to catch insects that are buzzing around. Obviously, in our winters, we don't have those. But the red-breasted nuthatch, pygmy nuthatch, which is our smallest nuthatch, and our white-breasted nuthatch here in the middle, they feed on frozen arachnids and insects and seeds and stuff that are in the bark. So they're able to find a food source. And everyone knows what this guy is, but who can say it first? Oh, wait, it says it right up here, sorry. This is our mountain chickadee. But here are some of the sounds. So people know this bird as, right, cheeseburger, but they don't hear these other vocalizations, which I want you to listen to. So they go chickadee, dee, 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 is what I hear when I hear that sound. But they have alarm calls. They also make other weird noises like all different things. So the is their mating call. And once they've found their girlfriend and the business is done and it's wintertime, you're not going to hear that sound anymore. But no, it's not a black-capped chickadee. So one thing that I need to stress is the chickadee with the, I like to call it the angry eyebrow. So it has this white supercilium, if you wanted to get technical, or the white eyebrow here. And that isn't on any other chickadee in California. So, or chickadee in general. So when you see paintings of like, oh, mountain chickadee, and it doesn't have this white eyebrow, the person painted a black-capped chickadee. So be on the lookout for art that's misidentified. I see it all the time. All right, so a lot of people that, big birders, they like to come to Tahoe for the finches and the owls and the woodpeckers. So, because we have so many trees and there's a lot of seeds and stuff like that to eat, and conifers to dig bills into. So finches are very prevalent in our area. We have house finch and Cassin's finch, but three of my favorite finches, or I guess this is probably my favorite finch is the pine grosbeak, which I find at Marlette Lake, and the red crossbills you can find all up at Mount Rose. Red crossbills are really interesting because they're one of the only birds in the area that can have babies at any time of the year, even if it's dead of winter. There's enough food, the red crossbill can have a clutch in the wintertime. And then we have our gray-crowned rosy finch, which is like a really high elevation bird, very beautiful. So that's a rarer bird that people like to come here to find. Also, we have a couple different grosbeaks that are in the area, and this is our black-headed grosbeak. So I'm sure if you've been looking outside your window this spring and early summer, you probably heard this grosbeak singing all the times if you're by a willow. And he doesn't stop singing. Sometimes he even sings on his nest, which isn't very safe, but likes to sing a lot. So this is our black-headed grosbeak. And then these two are evening grosbeak. So they, I've seen people put out a bunch of feed on their porch, and like 50 of these guys will show up. So here's our male, and here's our female, which is super cool because it's like a green beak or bill. But here's some really cool finch examples. And gross in German means large. So look how large this beak is, grosbeak. So my roommate's also getting here. I don't think she knows I'm in a presentation. So if you hear any background noise, that's what it is. So here are three different species of blackbirds. I have a few favorite birds. And I think my favorite marshy bird is this yellow-headed blackbird because it barks at you. So if you are hanging out and you're going birding, you see these beautiful cattails. On the very top is a yellow-headed blackbird. Excuse me if I said something different before. And it just kind of hangs on that cattail and just starts barking at you. And I always laugh because it's just the funniest noise to me. But these like to live in marshy habitat as well as the red-winged blackbird. But then we have this culprit, this mean guy. This is our brown-headed cowbird. And some of the nest research that I'm doing this year, I'm seeing a lot of parasitic behavior from these mean guys, call them jerks. So what they do is the brown-headed cowbird likes to the females lay their egg in another bird's nest. For example, a yellow warbler's nest. And then they lay their egg in there, which isn't that much larger, surprisingly. And then the moms of this, or the parents of the yellow warbler parents feed this cowbird not knowing it's not theirs, just with so much effort. And sometimes the cowbird, and I've seen this myself, pushes out the other eggs of the warbler and then just consumes all the food, and it gets way bigger than the warbler. And it's just this pretty annoying bird that just poaches the effort and energy of these little warblers are just trying to make a new clutch. So that's something that I'm also looking into a little bit more with our research, is the impacts of this brown-headed cowbird.
I was in Bend last week and I saw a dark-eyed junco feeding a brown-headed cowbird. I was really confused at first.
Yeah, and it's so much bigger. The baby is bigger than the adult, and it's just
twice.
Yeah, twice as big. Yeah. And so the 5 species I'm studying: dark-eyed junco, western wood pewee, dusky flycatcher, warbling vireo, and American robin. And I see these brown-headed cowbirds parasitize these nests all the time. It's just so frustrating to see. But they're native. They're not, they were more so in the Great Plains and they made their way over to the west. So it's not like they're an invasive bird. It's just they're not our favorite. But if you were to listen to one of their songs, which sounds like an up whistle, if you were to break that down, it's actually a very complex song, and probably to a female bird, it sounds really beautiful. But to us, we don't like them too much. Warblers. I have to we have 10 minutes. Okay, we're good. Warblers. The most beautiful little treasures of the Sierras, I think, besides some wildflowers. So we have beautiful warblers here in the region. And if you go out to, if you just go hiking around, especially right now, you can find a bunch of different warblers. Here's our Wilson's warbler, has this dark black cap, and I've been researching a lot at Marlette Lake. They're everywhere. So if you want to see warblers right now, go to Marlette Lake, take a nice hike up there, and you can, or Spooner Lake, even if you don't want to hike. They're all over the place. We also have our yellow warbler, which is, these are all males. This red streaky breast is an indication it's a yellow warbler. This is my favorite warbler. It's the McGilvray's warbler. And I don't know if you ever use a pishing method to find birds. It's like a psh, psh, psh. You know, birders on bird tours are kind of goofy, but these guys will pop out and they'll just like, we call it the Mac attack, where they're like, who's saying this or who's pishing? So they're kind of fun to like get out with a pish. Then we have our Nashville warbler, pizza, 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 cheese, 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 cheese. That's the song he makes. And then this is a rarer bird, but it's seen almost every year, is the American redstart. I've only seen it in Costa Rica, but they do inhabit the Tahoe region every once in a while. Much more rare though. And then here's our probably most common warbler, which is our yellow-rumped warbler. Note the yellow rump. But for the birders out here, what is the throat of our yellow-rumped warbler's color most of the time here?
Yellow.
Very good. Awesome. So so there's two different subspecies of yellow-rumped warbler, and this is the myrtle subspecies, which is more like the East Coast. I've seen one of them in the winter here, but we normally have our Audubon's warbler as our subspecies of yellow-rumped. So there's a more in-depth bird fact. We also have owls. We have 11 different types of owls that have been found in the Tahoe region. I've seen a spotted owl, so it's not impossible to find a wild one out here. But they're so interesting, especially because their eyes sockets are so large that it takes up over a quarter of their eye, or of their skull, or more than that. And they can also rotate their head 270 degrees so they can see prey. Because they can't, if you can see my screen, they can't use their eyes like we can, like we have these eyeballs. They have more like binocular, like more of a cylinder shaped eye, and so they can't move it. So they use their head to be able to see around. And if we were to try to bend our necks all the way around, we would cut off the circulation of blood to our brain. But owls luckily have a pooling system, which they're able to continue to pump blood to their brain as their necks have been turned. So very, very cool, interesting facts about owls. And we have our northern pygmy, which is our tiniest owl, our great horned owl, which is our largest species of owl. And then I feel like I see these the most. This is our northern saw-whet owl, which is, here's a juvenile. Super cute. And if you're into potentially having an owl in your backyard, get a saw-whet owl box, because they have been successful from people that I've recommended it to. Here's our great horned owl, and this is what the babies look like. These are called owlets. They look like little fluff balls. I have about 6 minutes, or maybe like 3 probably, huh, Sydney? So I wish I didn't have such little time. So sparrows, we have all different types of sparrows in Tahoe. Our most commons are probably the fox sparrow, which is our thick-billed fox sparrow. Our song sparrow, note this dot on the chest, which also the thick-billed fox sparrow has, but the song sparrows are smaller. And then our dark-eyed junco you can see year-round here, and when they fly, they have 2 white tail feathers that fly, or that like come out as they fly away. So dark head, light body, dark-eyed junco, song sparrow, and fox sparrow. So here's a northern vireo. This is, we have our Cassin's vireo and our warbling vireo. This is one of the birds that I'm studying. And they like to nest in aspen habitat. But unfortunately, there's an invasive moth that's destroying our aspen leaves in the region. That's my study subject right now. So this bird is the same bird as this bird. These caterpillars are munching on all these leaves that surround this, that's camouflaging this nest, and makes it very vulnerable to predators. So that's something that we're researching right now, is the impacts of white satin moth from Europe that have basically come into our aspen habitat and is defoliating our aspen leaves. So that's some sad things. But here is a cool picture I took yesterday of one of my nests. Here's 3 little baby warbling vireos. There used to be 4. Not sure what happened to the sibling, but they can open their mouths very, very wide. Well, I'm going to pass this. I'm going to pass these guys. I'm going to get to woodpeckers and then I'm going to end. We have awesome woodpeckers here in the region. And I think whenever I teach kids about woodpeckers, I like to start with, whenever I teach kids about birds, I like to start with woodpeckers because they're so unique. Number one, they have so much force coming out of from their bill going to the tree when they're drumming, that there's more force in that behavior than there is in a jet taking off into space. So how they're able to protect themselves, I'll tell you in a minute. Here are some of our species that we have. But interestingly, their tongues are very, very long. And when they drill a little hole to get an insect or get some sap out of the tree, they take their long, sticky tongue with some little barbs on the end, and they stick it in a hole and they can retrieve their food. Now, when they put their tongue back in their head, it splits into 2, okay, back in their head, splits into 2, and it wraps around their whole skull and goes through their nostril and basically acts as a seatbelt and a brain protection agent so they don't get brain damage when they're drumming into trees. So it's just such a cool thing, especially to introduce kids to birds with, because they're like, what? That's so interesting, and very, very cool. So here's our northern flicker, which was one of our most common species of woodpecker that we have in the region. So note this red mallard stripe for the males. I guess I only have 2 minutes. Yikes.
Do you want to open it up for questions or anything?
Yeah.
I'm sorry you had to rush it. I was told that there was something at 4 on the Zoom room, 30 minutes into the presentation.
All right. Yeah, we'll just open to questions. I only had a few more slides left. But anybody have any questions?
Sarah, hi, Bill Coleman with a quick question. I'm used to seeing hummingbirds in the summer, but last year and now this year, I'm not seeing hummingbirds at all. Any thought about that?
Okay, that's a great question. I've seen more hummingbirds this summer than I ever have. So maybe it's just the flowers where you're at aren't blooming as heavily as they have in the past, but go and find a Indian paintbrush or just a paintbrush bush or something with a long slender flower and wait 5 to 10 minutes and I'm certain you'll find one.
All right, thanks. I'll go look.
Yeah.
There was one in the chat that are there birds that you see in Lake Tahoe that are not present in North Lake Tahoe?
Oh, can you say that question again?
Are there birds you see in South Lake that are not in North Lake Tahoe?
Well, South Lake tends to have a lot more marshy areas. So some of the best birding is in South Lake Tahoe, especially because they also have the Angora burn there, where there's all those burn trees. You'll see a lot more lazuli buntings or woodpeckers, like Lewis's woodpeckers I haven't seen anywhere else but South Lake Tahoe. Also, a lot of shorebirds like to hang out on like the mud flats out in South Lake Tahoe because there's a lot more marsh area. So if I was to recommend people to go bird watching, I'd suggest South Lake Tahoe if they're coming into town, but there's so many great spots in the North Lake. And for those that have any questions or even just want to chat about birds with me or email any questions, I'm open to talking about birds with and answer any questions that you might have, or if you have any, oh, where should I go find this bird, or where should I find this bird? I probably have a good answer for that. So you can email me
also include her email and the follow-up email with the recording of this video for you guys as well.
Perfect. Sorry I had to rush out of it, but thank you so much to everyone that joined today. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks, Sarah. Super
Great.
informative.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
Great, thank you.